And most importantly, and if you're taking notes, write this down, it was about changing my identity. Because at the end of the day, identity and values drive behavior. Identity and values drive behavior. So if you want to make a change, you have to change your vision of who you are. You have to begin telling yourself a different narrative. And the narrative you tell yourself about yourself is everything. And if you tell yourself that you're a scared, undereducated kid from Tacoma whose family has never accomplished anything, let me tell you what you will become. A scared, undereducated kid from Tacoma who never accomplishes anything, because that's what you believe. You tell yourself that story enough, and it will become real. But on the flip side, you could tell yourself a story of you're a learner. You learn faster than most people. You're willing to put in more work than most people. You're willing to read more books than most people. You're willing to spend an inhuman amount of time every day improving your mind simply by getting new ideas into the system. And that you will admit that you're wrong faster than anybody else. That you won't let your ego get in the way. And you tell yourself that story over and over and over. So when somebody comes and tells you how stupid you are, that you're just a dumb kid from Tacoma, you go, you're right, that's amazing. Thank you for pointing out that flaw, because now that I'm aware of it, I can improve it because I'm the learner. And once I switched my narrative to being the learner, it didn't matter where I started, it only mattered where I was trying to go. And as long as I had that clarity, then I could execute, because I believed I could do anything I set my mind to without limitation.
Of course you struggle to remember it in your day-to-day life, because life is difficult and it's harder to do things than not to do them, and it's harder to do them well than to do them badly. You know, and it's easy to sit around and be hopeless. I don't mean it's emotionally easy, because it's not, but it's procedurally easy to be useless and to fall back into your old habits and to not discipline yourself. And it's a matter of continual practice, slow continual practice. And I think a good example of that is something like weightlifting. You know, if you start a weightlifting program, which I would recommend, by the way, because it's tremendously advantageous physically and cognitively, you're not going to really see results for a number of weeks, and then the results are rather slow, but you can get pretty decent results over a 6-month period and absolutely stellar results over a couple of years. And so you have to make sure your time frame is right and not to be too hard on yourself. And I did mention the future authoring program earlier, and one of the things I would recommend too is if you're having a hard time implementing your decisions, say your ethical decisions, that you spend a bit more time thinking them through and writing them down. And the future authoring program is really helpful for that. That's why we designed it. And so get your goals straight and continue to practice every day. And if you're not succeeding, then make your goals slightly smaller. You want to make your goals large enough so that they challenge you, but small enough so that you have a reasonable probability of succeeding at them on a day-to-day basis. And then you have to also understand that if you fail on a given day, like let's say you're trying to quit smoking and you quit for 2 weeks, and then you have a cigarette and you think, oh my God, now I've screwed it up. I'm not quitting anymore. You smoke a whole pack of cigarettes. It's like, well, there's a couple of mistakes there. And one is, well, just because you had a cigarette doesn't mean you failed. It just means that you had a cigarette. You can start stopping again the next day. And the fact that you had one cigarette in the last 2 weeks is a hell of a lot better than the 2 weeks that you had before that. And so you've got to be realistically humble. You've got to be ambitious enough in your goals so that you're pursuing something that you regard as truly meaningful and worthwhile. You know, and maybe you can judge that to some degree if you think about someone you love attempting the same thing and think about how you would feel if they managed it. And if you would feel good, then that's probably a good what would you say? That would be a good evaluation strategy to use on yourself. So you want your goals to be of sufficient nobility so that you can live with yourself properly if you're pursuing them, but you want them to be small enough so that you have a reasonable probability of implementing them. If you're having a discussion with someone and they're talking about things that don't have those characteristics, right, that they haven't made personal, then the conversation is almost never interesting. It's because the person is just they really are an empty shell through which ideology, cliches and slogans are pouring. There's nothing about that that's compelling because you don't see the grappling you don't see that the other person has grappled with the ideas and come to their own unique conclusions. And it really is in that mingling of the abstract and the particular that compelling wisdom is to be found. And so that's, and then concretely speaking, well, there's ways of earning your knowledge, and part of that is reformulating it in your own words. That's thinking it through, right? And discussing it until you have it at hand. You can talk about it and you can generalize from it because you truly understand it. But a huge part of that is also putting it into practice and deriving your own conclusions as a consequence. And some of that can be done with debate. It's like, here's an idea I came across, and here's the idea, and here's what I think it means. And this is how I think it would change things if I put it into practice. This is how I understand this idea. And what do you think of that? Like, that's a good debate or discussion, you know? Because then the other person could say, well, I don't really agree with the way you formulated that, or I don't agree with your conclusions. And hopefully it's a real discussion and not just one-upmanship, you know, because that's a pretty dull game.